I thought what we could talk about tonight is returning to love. So in spirituality, I mean, even as I talk about spirituality, most often I talk about this recognition of our innate awareness. And the reason for doing that is well, first of all, it's for most people, it's an easier doorway to go through than love or devotion to the whole, really. It's another path, but often it is easier for us to even conceptually understand that awareness is fundamental to our experience. Without awareness, whatever this body was experiencing, there would be nothing onto which it would be registered. There would be nothing that would notice whatever that experience was. So the awareness, the experience itself may come and go. It's the awareness that remains. So from that perspective, the awareness is fundamental. The awareness is the primary way we exist in the world. It may take us a while to realize that, but at least even conceptually, we can get some sense of it. Understanding it conceptually, of course, isn't anything like sort of the full body recognition of the truth of it. Where it's beyond our day-to-day decisions about whether it is really true that awareness is primary or not, or it's not subject to our opinions about it. It's actually what is watching about things over and over again. So for that reason, awareness is sort of the easier doorway to go through, and it is necessary for us to just get a little daylight between our mind, which tends to conceptualize everything. And by conceptualize, I mean just turning whatever experience we're having is turning it into a word description of whatever it is that's happening. So that's what our mind tends to do. We have the experience, and then our mind describes, whether we liked it, whether we didn't like it, what we think of the other person, what they should or shouldn't have done. That whole storyline that runs continuously in the mind about what's actually happening. So whatever those conceptualizations are, is always going to be something much more limited than the actual experience of it. But we treat it as if it was more real than the experience. We treat our mind's idea of what happens as more real than the experience itself. So seeing that is truly liberating, to see that what we think about things is not really how things are. Things are as they are, and our opinions about them from a very personal perspective are always going to be something other than that, something that we look at from our own apparent point of separate perspective. So when we see through that, when we see that, no, what we actually are is free of all of that conceptualization, then that is immensely liberating, because the conceptualizations are about ourselves and the world, and what we're good at and what we're not, and what we should have done and what we shouldn't have done, and all the regrets and unmet desires and things that we failed at, and on and on and on. All this compilation are all concepts about who we think we are. So to recognize that we're actually not that fundamentally, we can still remember all of that stuff, but we just realize that it's not fundamentally who we are, is immensely liberating, right? It's a transcendence away from this opinion of ourselves as a separate, little me, sort of out on our own in this world that can feel, a bit alien a lot of the times. We're just trying to get by, we're just trying to stay safe. So to find out that we're actually free from that is wonderful. I mean, it's an incredible realization to recognize that what we truly are as awareness, as spacious awareness, as awake awareness, whatever we want to call it, is free of whatever self-limiting thoughts that we may have carried, free of our storyline. So that's liberating, it's freeing. But we can also notice that we've sort of gone from one extreme of duality to the other, right? Before we've had this, let's say, transformative experience of awakening to our true nature, before that we thought, what I am is this sum total, the package of all these beliefs about myself. And then what we find out is, no, actually, I'm free of all of these beliefs about myself. Okay, but you notice that the reference point stays the same. It's still, the beliefs that I had about myself before I believed them, and now I don't. But the reference point stays the same. So in that sense, we've sort of jumped from one end of duality to the other. But it, like I say, it can be tremendously freeing. And when that is first encountered, there is a sense of, I've seen the whole picture. It feels like that. If anyone was to, say to someone who would just realize that, no, you haven't seen the whole picture, it would sound dismissive of that, but it's not that at all. I mean, it's an incredibly freeing, liberating realization to realize our fundamental nature as awareness. And when we come upon that, when that remains in an abiding sense, it's not just a flash of recognition that's forgotten the next day, but when it really settles in, it feels like I've seen the entirety of existence. I know what this life is about. And so the tendency, especially for spiritual people, oddly enough, who often, not always, but often really aren't that comfortable with ordinary life. Maybe it's been difficult. Maybe we've had some unfortunate encounters with other people, with life circumstances, with suffering, with illness, with death, etc. So to find ourselves transcendent to that's wonderful. But there may come a time that we, even with all our efforts to sort of maintain ourselves in that transcendent state, sort of aloof from, well, everything. If the cares of the world start to crowd us a little too much, we can step back into that transcendent state, and it's fine. It's pristine. It's safe. It's a bit aloof from the world, but it's beautiful, right? So the tendency is to stay there as long as we possibly can. Drag out our time in heaven for as long as possible. But there may come a time maybe not for a while, maybe a year or two, who knows, for a while, um, where there's some sort of a nagging little voice that sort of intrudes on our peace. And that voice might um, say something like, well, everything is peaceful and beautiful, but there seems to be a little dryness to it, like where's the juice, where's the joy of living, what about that? um, or we might ask ourselves a more structured question, like if the whole purpose of this journey is just to transcend from the belief in a separate self to a recognition of my formless reality that was there all along, then sort of what's the purpose of all this creation? Why didn't I just skip all that and just recognize this awareness from the get-go? What's all this form about? What's all this excitement and suffering and joy and difficult times? What's all that about? We might begin to ask ourselves, well, this awareness that I've realized, and then there's the world out there, how does this awareness move in the world? So we find ourselves sort of being drawn back into the very sort of human messiness, you could say, that we tried so hard to escape from. So there may be even some reluctance to do that. But nonetheless, we may still find ourselves drawn back into our humanity, really. And as we come back into our humanity, if we're willing and courageous enough to do that, we can see that the old concepts, where we relied on our conceptualization of what was happening, no longer works. So as we come back into this body, we can't sort of do it from a philosophical way, even a theological way. It's more raw than that. Just because we've understood that whatever concepts we had about whatever was happening weren't ultimately true. They were always destined to be less than the reality itself. So as we come back into form, we can no longer rely on the mind's ability to conceptualize things as we used to do. So that's sort of off the table. We've seen through that. It's no longer, it's not that we can't think about things, but we no longer give it the final role of judge and jury. The other thing that doesn't work so well as we come back into this body is that the things that activities or hobbies or ways we derive pleasure from life, those things that used to motivate us in that way no longer do. Almost none of them. So we might find that just a little disillusioned in a way, like, well, wait a minute, this used to give me a lot of pleasure to, I don't know, go out dinner with friends and, joke around and have a couple of glasses of wine. I mean, not that any of that is wrong or a problem at all, but, when we defined who we were and how we, derived meaning from life, etc., those kind of things, just don't seem to carry the same sort of juice as they did before. They no longer can motivate us. So we're sort of left a bit stranded. We've come down from our transcendent state. We've come back into the body, but we don't know um, how things work anymore. We might find ourselves, we don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to act. Things that, maybe even careers that used to, be a huge part of how we identified ourselves no longer seem to be as compelling as they were at one time. Or not, that we might find out that, no, that's truly what I feel to do. There's no absolute rule, but we might find a lot of our desires, the way we look at the world, has shifted dramatically. Sometimes relationships fall apart. Not if they're really based on sincere love for each other, but if they're based more on, I don't know, dependence and convenience or whatever, those are at risk. It can be. So things have changed, and so we don't have, conceptualizations to fall back on. We don't have old patterns of motivation to fall back on, and we sort of find ourselves, well, how do I act? How do I move? What do I care about? What do I do with my time? Who do I want to hang out with? So things can feel quite different. And at that point, we find ourselves, from the perspective of this awareness that we recognize that we are, being compelled to live our life from a more authentic place. And we can call that more authentic place love. Right? By love, I mean open-heartedness, willingness to experience the world, willingness to experience the other person, willingness to allow our own selves to be in their own conditioned ways, without judgment, without blame, without wishing things were different, without envy, without jealousy, without all of that, no longer works. So I know love has, 1,000 different meanings based on how we use it in a sentence, whether, I love pizza, or, I love that movie, or whatever. But obviously that's not what we're talking about. So this love isn't based on conditions. It's not like, I love you as long as, you live up to my expectations. I'll love you as long as you reciprocate and love me back. Otherwise, I reserve the right to change my mind. It's not, this love that we're talking about isn't conditional. It's not based on whether it is even received. It's not based on whether it's reciprocated. It's not even based on whether it's appreciated or not. It is an outpouring. An outpouring. It's something that's not demanding anything of the other person, or of life, or even of ourselves. It's just an outpouring. It's an open-hearted generosity of spirit. Okay. We may have tried that before. you know, and, you know, maybe a relationship or, you know, something in the workplace didn't respond as we had hoped that they would. You know, the love didn't come back our way. You know, our generosity was taken advantage of. Sure. I'm guessing that those situations have happened in one form or another to all of us. But it's actually not what I'm talking about. That love that can be hurt by whatever the world reflects back on us. If we were expecting a certain response, if we were expecting our lover to be a certain way, to act a certain way, and they didn't do that, you know, from the conventional standpoint of love, that would be, you know, unrequited love. It would be love that got smashed. It would be love that was betrayed. All of those characterizations of that sort of sticky relationships that can develop when there is expectations of the outcome. But this, let's say, true love that I'm talking about isn't dependent on the other person's response. It is just a willingness to be open to whatever the situation is, whether it's the other person, whether it's something arising within ourselves. It's also not dependent on any particular emotion. It's not a high emotional state. It's not, you know, I'm not talking about special spiritual feelings, you know, overwhelming feelings that can arise within within this feeling space. That can all happen. But the love that I'm talking about is larger than all of that. It is what encompasses all of that. What allows all of that. You could say that when awareness moves through these body minds with sort of minimal distortion, minimal conditioned distortion, what that movement tends to look like is love, is a sense of caring for other people, you know, caring for the environment, you know, caring about unnecessary human suffering, caring about ourselves, caring about this body, taking care of this body. You know, this awareness tends to allow that openness. And that openness, where we've been hurt before, you know, we can look back from the perspective of this awareness that we're talking about. We can look back on times in the past when we've been hurt, where our openness has been rejected, where our generosity has been taken advantage of, where our love has been stomped on. But we can look at those times and see that what we were bringing to the table was also from a very personal perspective. We were wanting a certain outcome that we wanted, right? So this is different. We can see in the past that wanting created a distortion of a genuine feeling that we've all had, but expressed in a way that was not not ultimately in alignment with the entire situation. You know, we're coming at it more from what I want. how I want other people to respond to me, how I want um, my lover to be, how I want my boss to be. So this is something deeper. This is something where we are um, just open to whatever life brings to us. And it's actually very similar to the way we've talked before about awareness, where the awareness is present for everything. So it's present for, the good times, the difficult times, really without preference. Sure, our mind, from a personal perspective, of course we have preferences, but from the point of view of awareness, it is prepared to receive whatever arises within our field of awareness. And same with this open-heartedness. If we're saying, well, I want to be open-hearted, but and I'll be open-hearted towards this person or this group of people, not so much those people or that person. Then it's not really open-hearted, then it's really a conditional thing. If we say we're loving, but I'll be loving towards the people that reciprocate, appreciate that, respect that. It's still conditional, right? So what we're talking about here is something larger than that, where that sense of because of the recognition of the awareness that we've recognized, we can see that same awareness operating in the other person, any other person, even people that we don't even like or agree with at all. Right? It's the same awareness operating there, maybe more distorted, maybe conditioned in a way that doesn't sort of jive with our conditioning. But it's still the underlying life force there is that same consciousness, awareness, manifesting in an infinite variety of ways. But we think somehow that we're the ones who can judge whether that manifestation should look like that, but not like that. So all of that judgmental positioning, where we believe that we can distinguish between what should happen, what shouldn't happen, what's right, what's wrong, where we remain in control as a separate person, is what shuts down that sense of openness. And I'd suggest that fundamental sense of openness has always been there, but it's something for all of us, but it's something that for most of us, we've turned away from a long time ago. As younger children or maybe teenagers, when we were told that, I don't know, that we were too sensitive, you need to toughen up, you got to learn to be an adult and, not feel so much, not feel so compassionate for the other person. You've got to look out for yourself. I mean, a lot of these themes were ingested a long time ago, all of which tended to cause us to, in a very innocent but self-protective kind of way, sort of wall off this deeper sense of compassion. So, to undo that wall, we can begin to allow ourselves to feel again, right? From the perspective of awake awareness, we realize that actually what I am, this awareness, has never been hurt. Difficult things have happened, yes, no doubt. But this awareness is untouched in all of us. When we recognize that, we realize that actually this um, true love, this open-heartedness, is similarly untouched. We may have sort of cordoned it off, pretended it didn't exist, decided we're going to look out for ourselves. But it itself is still pristine, but we need to allow it to begin to feel whatever's present to be felt again. And we can do that just, we did it right at the beginning of tonight's talk, where we're just feeling into the room, feeling into the sort of non-separateness of the environment around us, being welcoming it, being appreciative of it, being grateful for, just being alive to experience this entire kaleidoscope of life, right? What an immense, incredible journey. This whole existence, this whole entire manifestation, right? I mean, even to see that this whole existence didn't have to be, right? Of course, there'd be no one to know that there was nothing there. But that's the delight. Somehow this entire manifestation and our ability to recognize it, to see it, to participate in it, to be open to it, to experience it, is just absolutely extraordinary. I mean, just to allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by that simple recognition of the amazing opportunity to be alive for a short time. Right. There's a wonderful quote by Rumi, a Sufi poet from a number of centuries ago, that I really like. The quote goes, having died to self-interest, love risks everything and asks for nothing. Love gambles away every gift God bestows. Outpouring, outpouring without regard to outcome. Gift without even the sense of I am giving a gift. It's just, we're not doing it at this point that I'm talking about. We're no longer doing it as a spiritual practice. We're not doing it because, we're not loving because we think it's a nice thing to do. It's just, it's the only reasonable response to have been given this gift of life, or life, this life. The only reasonable response. So we can become more and more in touch with this place in ourselves that I'm calling true love. We can call it our spiritual heart. We can call it our sacred heart. It's not even, it can feel like it's located in our chest, right? If you wanted to say, tell your beloved that you love them, you wouldn't say, I love you, right? We don't point to our head. It's not coming from mind. It's not coming from concept. And we say, I love you, from here, from something deeper, from something that's, you could say, drop down from conceptual mental imaging down to something that is much deeper than that, non-conceptual, feelings that stir us deeply, that we can't quite put into words. And it's better if we don't even try, right? But it's something that we can experience if we allow ourselves to feel. It's almost like, I don't know, if we're walking on in the snow and our foot got wet and our foot was frozen and we come back into a warm house. When you begin to thaw out that foot, it really hurts, right? Before it comes back to life, it really hurts as it's being warmed back up into life. And in some sense, we need to, go through the pain to recognize what we have turned our backs on a long time ago, as children, as teenagers, young adults, where we turned our back away from caring that much about the world, that much about the other person, cared so deeply that we actually forgot about ourselves, maybe for a short time, but and for many of us, we've lost that connection. And then as adults, we sort of wonder, well, I feel separate, I feel separate from the world, like, there's something, to experience or, to feel fulfilled. But I don't get it. I'm here, I feel separate from the other person. I even feel separate from myself. Maybe I certainly feel separate from the unity of all things, whether we call that, God, Buddha nature, source, doesn't actually matter. But that sense of separation from that. But when we can see that it's something that we inflicted on ourselves unknowingly, innocently, there's no blame here. But to see that, to be willing to see, no, that's something that I once felt. Maybe it's just a whisper in the background, but it's something that at some time in my life I cared deeply about. Whatever. It could be a sibling, it could be a pet, it could be, place where we grew up, walking in the woods, seeing a bird. It can be anything, but something that sort of drew me out of myself, drew me into a sense of wonder, a sense of awe. That's what we've given up, walked away from, walled ourselves off from, where we cared so deeply that we forgot about ourselves. There's a Zen master from, I think he was, I don't know, 10th century, back about then, Japan, Dogen, and he had a famous quote, which was, to know yourself is to forget yourself. And to forget yourself is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things. 10,000 things just means everything. To know yourself is to forget yourself. To forget yourself is to be enlightened by everything, by life, by the next experience. So this is what we're talking about here is a dissolution of what we take our boundaries to be. Where we no longer see the other person as the other person, You know, we can see differences. I mean, our eyes still work, right? You know, we can see that this person looks different from that person. We're not disputing that. But what we also see is that from a much deeper perspective, that there actually um, isn't another person. You know, we can see that the same awareness that we've recognized in operating through this body is also operating through that body. Same, same, same. So is it another person or just another manifestation of the same source? Same source expressed as awareness there as here. If there's an appreciation here of our deepest nature, certainly we can see it there as well. And then the question is, how do I respond then? You know, then we're talking about a place that's actually beyond morality, because we're not doing it because we think we should. We're not doing it because we were told that we should. We don't do it. It's just it is what is needed in that situation for the highest and best good of everybody involved. That's the movement. But it's not being done for any purpose. It's just being done because it's just the obvious thing to do. You know, it's not being done for a goal. It's not being done to earn merit. And it's not being done to, you know, get into heaven. It's just, it's the only reasonable response to life.